¿Qué tal amigos? ¿Cómo están? Bienvenidos a esta nueva serie de Tardes con Sabina con un tópico demasiado especial, las voces de la arquitectura en América. Y en esta ocasión estamos desde el sur de la Florida y hemos elegido uno de los espacios más emblemáticos que tenemos aquí en la ciudad de Coral Gables, que de hecho es parte del condado Miami-Dade en Miami, y es el maravilloso Hotel Biltmore. Y de hecho hoy tengo un invitado que para mí es muy especial, que haya aceptado ser la primera persona que estamos entrevistando en este Voces de la Arquitectura, el señor Tom Prescott, que es el dueño y además la persona a la cabeza del Hotel Biltmore y de Siguenos Group, que tiene otra propiedad en la zona de Clearwater. Tom, welcome. It's a pleasure for us to be in your home, in your hotel.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here with you.
We are so thrilled to be able to feature as our first property of this series, which is called Voices of Architecture in America, the Biltmore Hotel. And this is a series which is going to be coming out of Mexico, coming out of Colombia, and then coming out of South Florida. The Biltmore Hotel, 95 years to this point, a landmark for Coral Gables. How was your feeling when you acquired the property as part of your portfolio?
So, of course I'm biased when I tell you all this, but the property itself is not just a landmark to Coral Gables, but a National Historic Landmark, because it has stood the test of time back in its 95 years, not just for all the events that have transpired since that first breaking of ground, but kind of defining the eras that went with it, from a Gilded Age to the Depression to the recovery to a war period to everything that followed to where we are today. And so it really has been kind of an endless and timeless landmark that shows the evolution not just of the hotel itself, but of Coral Gables and the country as a whole.
And being South Florida so young compared to Europe and to some areas of our world, the Biltmore Hotel has become a place where people can see real architecture. How would you define, as the owner, what we're seeing inside of the property?
So when my family first acquired the property some years ago, we really were taken by, even though it was in slight disrepair due to its use during the war and its closing afterwards, but we saw the promise based on the architecture that you mentioned. We have since kind of tried to revert back to what George Merrick originally envisioned when he first looked at these plantation lands in South Florida, and as you pointed out, a very young country, if you will, young area. My friends who are from Spain would disagree and say, well, no, it's very old if you go all the way back. But as a new state in the United States, it had all this promise. You had this grand building and this structure based off of the Sevilla Tower in Spain. You had Moorish architecture. You had an element of French colonial, Italian, Mediterranean style. That really was something new to the area, if you think about it. But it enabled us to then continue with this type of design, maintain it, build upon it, and actually accentuate the features, the architectural features and elements throughout the building, which really made it unique, not just to South Florida, but to the state and the country as a whole.
And it's very special, the fact that, as you mentioned, we could say that Coral Gables, because of the name of the streets, right? When you drive around Coral Gables, you have the opportunity to see streets called Málaga, Sevilla, Granada. But the Biltmore, and I think most of the architecture in Coral Gables has a fusion of different nationalities, right?
True. Similar to what you were just mentioning, it does. We have even taken those names that you referenced and incorporated that into our ballrooms. Everything from our major ballrooms of Granada and Alhambra to, our country club, where we have other aspects that relate to other cities and places harking back to the old world. But yes, it is strewn throughout Coral Gables, the city beautiful, as we've dubbed ourselves.
You mentioned something that I think that it's really interesting. It used to be, you said, a hospital?
Correct, during World War II.
How was that? When you acquired the property, did you think that that had some type of effect on the fact that the property is so huge? Or what exactly? One time I stayed at a hotel in Berlin that used to be a hospital.
Is that right?
but this one is much larger.
Yes. So during World War II, the U.S. government took it over under eminent domain for the war effort, and specifically to house our returning GIs, U.S. GIs coming back to recover here.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Please.
before it used to be a hotel.
Before it used to be a hotel, correct. As George Merrick envisioned it originally back in the early 1900s, he envisioned this as the centerpiece of Coral Gables, that it would be the tallest, most prominent structure in the area, and it would allow the rest of the city to actually develop around it. So if you look at Coral Gables today, it is stuck true to that vision that he had way back when. In fact, flying in with American Airlines, for example, or any other airline that comes into Miami Airport, you see it in the distance as the tallest, most prominent structure, surrounded by 150 acres of golf course. And then you see the city beautiful with all of its green top and its canopy that actually shields it around, so you don't have the type of big development in like a downtown Miami area that you can't differentiate between the different structures. Here you can, and you can see it.
Do you think the Biltmore Hotel was the historic landmark that created what we see in some of the architecture in Coral Gables? I mean, did it come out from this property, or were there other properties similar?
So I think that the Biltmore Hotel and the Coral Gables Congregational Church, which is located just across the street, is one of the oldest Spanish churches in the United States. I think that it had a powerful impact on the surrounding areas in terms of architecture, because again, being developed in the early 1900s and opening its doors in 1926, it literally led the way for all the development that followed. So I think that the city administrators and all the subsequent administrations try to remain consistent with that original design direction.
When you are preserving architecture as an owner, it's important, of course, to try and keep the look and feel as best as possible and historic. It went through a renovation when you acquired it. How difficult was that, and what was your challenge when trying to preserve the look and feel, but at the same time being a property that has to keep up to date for your guests?
So it's a great question. Since we acquired the property back in the mid-1990s, actually early 1990s, we've undergone 3 major renovations, the most recent one that you're referring to being at the end of 2018. In that particular area, we recognized that while we wanted to maintain the character of the property, we had to bring it up to modern-day standards in regards to client needs and desires. And by that I mean ample lighting, available outlets. You know, now with the average customer coming, or traveler, I should say, coming through, having an iPhone, having an iPad, having a laptop, you needed to have the ability to provide for that. We also needed to get past some of the older in-room rugs and other things, the soft goods that just did not really complement what the Biltmore should be at this point. So we undertook the most recent renovation, which actually was in excess of $30 million, specifically to renovate from inside within, if you will. Meaning we did not touch the exterior facade of the hotel, except for changing all of the windows to make sure they were hurricane and impact resistant. Because as you can appreciate, that's something that we need to do here in South Florida. But all the changes in the rooms and the meeting rooms were done with this tie back to what we had to keep for the original design of George Merrick. And so all the color patterns, all the hues that our architects and designers did, maintain that original character that was the Biltmore.
Assembling the team was, I can imagine.
It is a challenge.
I'm not sure if challenging or fun, but assembling the team is hard.
It is. When you're doing a renovation on a historic property versus other properties that we have that are actually not historic by nature, you tend to have a little bit more challenges, as you pointed out. We also have a very active city government, which we're in partnership with to preserve this landmark along with the rest in the City Beautiful. And they were great in working with us to ensure that we could actually do what we needed to do in a reasonable amount of time without disrupting the community, our guests that were staying in other parts of the hotels. But there were challenges. You have to work around certain frescoes. You must be careful when you uncover something in what we would call a a field condition, we'd have to assess it with the appropriate architect and with the historic preservation officer and see, is that something that we need to preserve? Is it something we can replace with similar workmanship? So those were challenges, but we got through them together, and the final product we're very pleased with.
Let's talk about the elevators.
Okay.
The elevators, I toured the property this weekend, and the elevators are amazing because they make you feel like if you are part of history. How challenging was keeping the elevator as it is, or did you change a lot of let me rephrase. Was there a lot of makeup on the elevator, basically?
So you have a keen eye, as we knew, as your viewers know. But what we did with the elevators, we actually renovated the elevator components. So we kept the cabs in its original form. That's the woodwork that's on the inside. And you probably noticed the HB for Hotel Biltmore just above the doors. But we changed all of the mechanical components, all brand new elevators during that renovation. So all three of our passenger elevators, even our back of house service elevators, we changed all those to new because we had to do so. But the character of the workmanship and the woodwork and cabinetry inside of that is all consistent with the original design.
Now, the pool, was it always that big?
So it was always that big. What a lot of people don't realize is way back in the day, there actually used to be dive competitions and Miss Florida contest in the pool.
Oh, in that pool?
In that pool right there. In fact, where we currently have our cabanas, there used to be bleachers for the crowds to gather and watch. There's these great pictures that we line throughout the hotel in various hallways that show some of that past, look of the pool itself. The major difference that people focus on is that back then it was about 20 to 23 feet deep, which of course in today's tort law world, you can't have that for liability reasons.
But it's still very deep of a pool?
It is. It's a standard pool size, so it's safe, but it is a very large pool. At one point, the largest pool in the continental United States. At over 650,000 gallons, it's still a very large pool.
The photographs on most of the walls of the hallways, they're historic.
What we did during the renovation is we took, each floor had a different theme. So you'll see on one floor there might be pictures of the golf course, both as it was being developed back in the 1920s.
But the golf course was originally there.
Correct. The golf course actually used to be 36 holes.
Oh, wow.
And at one point, it actually split to now become both the Biltmore Golf Course and the Riviera Country Club Golf Course, which is north of Bird Road. So Bird Road, which is a major intersection, actually was that delineation, if you will, between the two golf courses. But going back to the point of the floors, all of those pictures that you see, the Historical Society assisted us in retrieving, and we put in new frames and new lighting, and I actually find that most people enjoy walking down the hallways to look at them and kind of hark back to yesteryear.
The rest of the materials that we're seeing on the walls, the lamps, we have here on the background a very nice setting. All those materials were kept and more things were brought with the renovation?
In some cases, for instance, if you look at the ceilings here in the upper lobby of these frescoes, we were very thankful. You mentioned the Army. When they were here, the U.S. Army actually put drop ceilings and preserved these, so it only required certain restoration touch-up versus damaging the ceilings, then we had to start from scratch. They laid down protective floor covering. They actually did more than you would think that a military unit would do, and that enabled us to actually come through and restore things versus having to just start from scratch in many instances. But yes, everything you see we tried to replace with the same identical material and workmanlike product where we could. In some cases you couldn't, but in much as we could, that's what we tried to accomplish.
I noticed the chandeliers as well.
Yes.
They have semi-precious stones.
Yes.
One room that I saw had amethyst hanging from the chandeliers.
Very good eye. In fact, you'll notice that in the guest rooms during our renovation, one of our chandeliers that we hang over the beds have a smaller version of that particular stone that our designer took from all of the ballrooms and other areas to bring up into the rooms as well.
Let's talk about your audience, your guests. Have you felt when you do your studies and your marketing that it's a property that it's well appreciated by people who like golf, Miami, architecture? Who is your audience?
So this is a bit of an anomaly of a year, as you can imagine, coming out
But
of...
historically?
Correct. So what we've seen over time is we'll have two types of guests. If you separate the group-oriented business that comes here for a meeting and they chose this place, whether it be because they like this place, they want space, they wanted to be in South Florida, whether they wanted a golf component to their meeting. If you're looking at just straight kind of transient guests that came through, if you were not set on going to the beach, which of course the beach is its own experience here in Miami, but if you were not set on that and you wanted to find a property that was unique and had character, whether it be because you wanted this type of surrounding, whether it be because you wanted golf specifically, or the pool type of Mediterranean feel, or you just wanted to come and be separated from the city and feel like you were in your own oasis, that's what we found, that we got a number of those type of audiences to come here. And they've changed over time, but they still all have that kind of draw to one of those components I just mentioned.
You seem like you enjoy a lot being part of the Biltmore. Do you think that you're going to have more landmark properties within your portfolio?
It's difficult to say, and we always are looking for the right type of fit in our portfolio. The difficulty with a property like this is, as you can imagine, it's quite expensive to maintain, more than an average simple box structure, as we call it in the industry. It has a lot of benefits to it that you don't have with just a typical box. We always are open to it. I thought during the COVID crisis, as I would call it, that we would see opportunities there, but a lot of other owners, whether it be family owned or in some other capacity, they all had the same kind of feeling that we did, my family did, which was, we want to maintain this. We're stewards of the landmarks and we want to continue with it. So I always like to say, yes, we're open to, but I haven't seen anything yet that would allow us to acquire that.
I have to ask you, did you do something different to appeal the local public? Of course, I've seen a lot of, and not a lot, but quite a few properties here in Coral Gables that actually feature the Biltmore as the private club of the property, because people do use the gym and they do use the pool. Was there something specific that you thought with your marketing team that would be perfect for the locals to start coming in more?
Well, as you can appreciate, I think I have the best marketing team in all of Florida, as you know. So as a result, we had identified early on that in order to engage the community, not just come over for dinner at any of our restaurant outlets, but to engage them, we said, let's build kind of a feel of a country club, as you mentioned. So there is a membership component here where people can be part of the gym. They can come over for the spa, and they can get certain concessions that others that are just coming here on a one-time basis do not get. So that drew in the community, everyone within a 3 to 5 mile radius that felt like, well, this was their own country club if they didn't have another one to go to.
And there's the tennis courts as well.
There's also the tennis courts that are just next door. So between tennis, spa, pool, golf, you have everything located right here.
Resort.
So we have a lot of quinceañeras, we have a lot of like family-oriented activities that happen here, which shows that people view this as almost their place to come to instead of going someplace else that is impersonal.
Tom, it's been a pleasure.
It's been mine. Thank you for taking the time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Always.